Hello, YouTube. This is Bub's Comics coming at you with the No Faces Comic Chat. I have with me, as always, Roger Metarog. Say hi.
Greetings, everyone. Good to be here.
And
Metarog, say
oops, and not with me, although frequently with me and us is DS Comics. He couldn't make it tonight on account of he was actually it's the springtime, as you know, across the country, and he is entering. He has a prize pig. He's entering in the county fair. Uh, so apparently, this pig has been hanging out in the barn and drawing mysterious writings via spiderweb above his pen. And so they're going to take him to the fair and hope that they get a nice, sweet, awesome ribbon there at the fair. So we wish him luck. So good luck to you, DS, in all your county fair activities, and may you bring home a real winner. So.
I think that was Charlotte's Web, Bub. That's not what DS is up to this week.
Well, technically, we don't know if his name is actually Charlotte or not. So I'm going to go ahead and stick with that.
DS is in the chat, by the way.
Is he? I don't see him in there.
He's in there, all right.
Oh, yeah, there he is.
He's hanging on every word. He's saying, "Whoa, wonder what Bub's going to want to hit me with this week."
I didn't think they'd get good Wi-Fi out at the fair, but you never know what those carnies can do. So in the chat already, we got Rayman the Silencer Man. We've got Pope Cerebus. We've got the Gray Man. We got Mr. Gretzky. We got DS Comics saying, "What's up, everyone?" And we got, let's see, Area 51 Mike's in the house. Werewolf by Lunchtime. The Go-To Geeks are here. Boy, we got a nice string of peoples here. Comic Geek McD is up late again. Welcome. And so we're doing well. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us for the No Faces chat. So glad to have you. Fair warning on tonight's chat, it may ruffle a few feathers. I'm sure DS is going to be sorry he missed it. But we're kind of going to be talking about scams and scammers and all the forms that they take as pertains to comics. And there's some people out there that enjoy a good scam, so or participate in some of the many forms of it, as we'll talk about. So if you're one of those people, that's fine. I'm not knocking anybody, and I'm certainly not trying to put anybody's side hustle down. If this is what you do to feed your family and what you got to do, then good luck to you. But I definitely we look for honesty in these purchases, because for me, when I'm buying a book or anything like that, I want it to, it means something that the transaction goes well. Especially if you're ever someone that likes to get books signed. I know C. Woodard out there, he's a big signature guy. If you're ever somebody who likes to get book signs, one of the things that happens is that if you have a really good experience at the table with the artist or the writer, whoever you're getting a signature from, it really adds value to that signature, and it creates an instant memory that signature will always bring you back to. But if you have a bad experience, you almost wish they didn't sign your book. So, it kind of adds a lot to it, or it can take a lot away from the value of something when this stuff like that happens. So we're kind of talking about that. Roger, you got anything to throw out there early on?
Well, I can only say in the old days, before the internet, there were still scammers. They just did things a bit differently, right? I mean, but for example, you of course about the Cerebus #1 counterfeit issue.
Tell us.
And that was a big stink way back in the 80s. Because that comic book got very popular very quickly, and they were very short run. That first issue was a very short run. In fact, many comic shops never ordered it. So somebody took it upon themselves to counterfeit that issue, and they did a fairly good job of it for 1980s. And I know the comic book shop that I was at, they bought one, and it was a counterfeit. And they paid, back then probably $100, no big deal nowadays, but at that point it was kind of a big stink, and that happened to a lot of places. So I'm just saying that just to say that scams are nothing new. probably been going on, since Satan tempted Adam and Eve, in the garden. I mean, scans have been going on forever. So, but now things are just a little more, a little bit more, harder to detect unless you have certain clues, which I'm sure Bub's going to tell you about.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that part of the problem with buying books already online is that you can't hold and tell the condition for yourself. That's one of the reasons that I think that CGC, why there is such a market for CGC, and people can say, oh, it's for preservation. Okay, I get that. There's lots of ways to preserve books. I think that there's main value is that they're assigning a grade to the book, and makes the buying and selling and the transaction of it all a lot easier to stomach for everybody, because now, even though I can't hold the book in my hands and I can't exactly determine the grade of it, at least I know it's authentic. I know whether any kind of touching up has been done to it. Color touch has been mentioned already in the chat. Any kind of trimming has been done. I'm already aware of those things. So now the only thing that I have to worry about is, do I agree with the grade? But at least the rest of it is taken care of. Same thing with signatures. If you have a verified signature or a witness signature or anything like that, that helps too, with the third-party grading company stepping in and adding some authentication to all that. It really does allow for a little bit more peace of mind when purchasing. And some of those older books, especially, if DS were here with us tonight, he'd be talking about the golden age books having a lot of restoration, and it could be old restoration too. It can be something that somebody did 20 years ago, but it's still restoration. So there's things of that.
Certainly, and of course, I believe he mentioned that most of the pre-code horror don't have restoration, but obviously, when you're getting into the very high dollar of anything, whether it be old, new, whatever, if it's a high dollar item, there's temptation to make it better, make it more expensive, and the color touch is trimming. That you mentioned that's another thing, because Marvel chipping in the 60s was rampant, and it is today too, but I'm just saying that was something that really detracted from a comic book, and a lot of them were unsellable because the chipping was so bad. So that's when somebody got the bright idea, hey, if we trim that off, it looks better, it presents better, and it sells better. But of course, that means that you're, defacing the comic book. You're taking off a small percentage of that comic book. And so nowadays, that is a big thing. There's a lot of AF-15s, FF1s, the big, those big key books, early Marvels, that are trimmed either vertically or horizontally, because they were just so terrible looking, and were unsellable back in the 80s.
And not all things that people do to a book are considered a restoration anyway. A lot of times they'll let the tape go by. They don't mind tape. They don't consider that restoration. You can have amateur preservation and it not be restoration. I think there's a big difference there.
Right. Yeah. And I've talked to DS about this. Like, I believe that preservation of the older books is, to me, it shouldn't be counted off. I think he disagrees to a certain degree for that, but to me it shouldn't, because paper has a finite life, right? I mean, pulp, the fibers are going to separate and eventually they're going to go brittle, and watch The Time Machine, right? And when he touches the books in the library, they turn to dust because they have just degraded to such a great degree. So what we're talking about are commodities that have a finite life, whether it's 200 years, 500 years, whatever it may be. At some point, they're no longer going to be in the condition they are now. So I believe that if you have something that is deteriorating to that extent, and you can either halt that process or you can retard it to a great degree, I don't consider that restoration. I consider that preservation, and I think that is something which should be done for at least, so we at least have a copy of certain very important comics, pop culture icons into the future for generations to enjoy.
I agree. And we have in the chat, we have some chatter about the difference between tape versus glue, where tape is not considered restoration. And again, when we say considered restoration, unfortunately, it really is a lot in the hands of third-party grading companies when they all three come to a consensus on what is restoration, what is not. And then, of course, the assumption is that most of that comes from feedback from the comic community and people submitting books and buying books. But basically, once they have made the rule that tape is not restoration, but glue is, then there you go. Now that's the rule that's set. That's the new ongoing used definition of restoration as far as tape and glue is concerned. So that's something to keep note of, that it's not always what we believe. It's as much as you want to if you're buying a book, but you have to understand that the community at large is probably going to adhere to what the grading companies have agreed to be restoration. Another one that comes up a lot is pressing. Roger, how do you feel about pressing? This is interesting to me. This is an ongoing debate, and it's funny to me because everyone seems to have the same answer, but it doesn't necessarily coincide with what the grading companies say. So how do you feel about pressing as it pertains to restoration?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting topic, because that there was such a stigma even in the early 2000s about pressing pressing is restoration. I remember this in the forums. They wanted to know if it was pressed or not, right? Because it obviously, we've seen, I'm sure everybody has seen pressing videos, Economics and Comics, Erod, Night Tiger, Gino Bonino just did one. There's a ton of people out there that have presses that do a really good job of really enhancing the look of a comic, and that's essentially what it does, right? You're enhancing the look. You're not adding anything to it per se, except moisture, which is going to be taken out again when you're pressing, but you are enhancing the look of the comic greatly. And to me, I think it's a great thing. Because again, we're talking comics that have dog ears, that have spine rolls, that if you leave it in that condition, it's going to degrade. That spine roll is eventually going to crack, and the creases are eventually going to break color, crack, all that. Spine rolls are going to are not going to fix themselves, and all they're going to do is just going to keep they're going to keep binding the book in that spine roll. So I think that to me, pressing is a fabulous thing, because it enhances the book, and it takes away those defects that really weren't there initially. Now, you can say to yourself, okay, well, you're modifying the book. You are, but you're actually reverting it back to its more original state. And to me, that means that it's actually a positive, because you're reverting the comic book back to a much better and presentable state, rather than something that looks very, very a kilter and just as an eyesore. So to me, I think it's a great thing. Pressing is a great thing.
That's interesting. Now, I agree with you. Pressing a book doesn't bother me. I like to know the book's been pressed. It certainly presents better. And as a low grade collector, I like to see a book present as well as it can, even if, when you have something with, say, a subscription crease down the center, there's not much you can really do with that. Even when you press it, if it has a color breaking crease right down the middle, it's still going to have that white line go down it. Yep. But now it's a flat white line as opposed to something that catches the light every time you pick it up.
Right.
I don't see it really as any different than putting a book in Mylar, which hides a lot of the defects and a lot of the wave to a book. Everything in Mylar looks better. Well, why is that? Some people hate Mylar, and I'll throw that out too. I had a guy tell me one time that he hated Mylar because it hid the defects in a book. And I said, well, why are you falling in love with the defects of a book? They are defects, but or damage, if you will. But I think one of the things that comes up when it comes to pressing in particular is it restoration? Well, I think technically, yes, it should be considered restoration, but because of the inability to detect it easily and readily and consistently across multiple books, I think that the grading companies have to pull away from calling pressing a book restoration. because first of all, they're selling it as a service. So that right there, they're not going to sell a service that causes any label other than blue, unless it's going to be yellow, right? And they can charge more. So they're so. And the other thing that I think is happening is that the pressing, the rampant cases of pressing, is now bringing the book back to a place of a higher. It gives a book that you might have from the 40s a look that it's brand new. And once that starts happening, that's where I think these 9.8s come into play. If you have a book, you read it once, it's for all intents and purposes, you would call it, a perfect condition book. And if somebody says, well, a scale of 1 to 10, you say, well, I guess I can't technically give it a 10 because I did look through it. Probably got a fingerprint or two somewhere. But other than that, I think it's probably still a 9.8. I'm like, okay, but you send it in and it gets a 9.2, gets a 9.4, 9.6. And like, why didn't I get that 9.8? Well, in the case of certain books, especially books like ASM 252, that's one I like to harp on. Also ASM 300. The books that are in the top, you can look them up. The books that are in the top 10 or so books that say CGC grades, period. All the books that they grade, they see that same book 10 times a day. And if they're grading that same book 10 times a day, and 3 of them have been pressed, and the other 7 haven't, you can immediately tell the difference between a pressed book and an unpressed book when you hold them in your hands. The paper has a different feel to it. It has a different flexibility. They're more supple. You can they're flatter, of course. So if someone's holding up a pressed book and an unpressed book at CGC, and they've already graded 3 that were pressed and gave them 9.8s, and then you get another one that doesn't seem to have any defects, but just doesn't have the same flatness as the ones they gave 9.8 to, they're naturally going to give it a 9, 6 or 9.4. I think it's automatic,
Yeah, this is a whole nother dynamic now because, grading services, and you see, this is how incredible it's been a 180, Bub, because when CGC first started, I'm telling you, anything that was even remotely that was said it was pressed was automatically dinged. If they got whiff of it, right? If it came from a known restorer, press, or whatever, the scuttlebutt was that they would give it a lower grade just because it had pressing, whether it be restoration. Now, let's define restoration. Restoration means restoring back to an original state of some sort. Okay. Yeah. All right. So we're putting that definition out there. So I don't have a problem with that. But now, not only are they not, dinging or not taking off for pressing, they themselves have a pressing arm of their service. Okay, so again, things have changed. So 180. When I heard that they were pressing in-house, I couldn't believe it, because in the CGC forums, you go back to the early 2000s. 90% of the members were just dead set against it, absolutely dead set against grading a comic that was pressed because they thought that it was cheating, right? Essentially, I'm paraphrasing here, okay? I'm not speaking for everybody there. And now we're talking about, and this brings kind of a conflict of interest, as you're saying, because now if there's so much as one little, ding, one little divot, one little warp in that comic, and you're right, compared to a copy which they see all the time, it's human nature, if not strictly to the Overstreet standards, that they're not going to give it a higher grade. You would think. I can't speak for GGC. I know nothing about their internal procedures, but I'm saying human nature would lead you to believe, like I think what you're intimating is that they're, naturally, you compare 2 of them. This one was pressed that day or the day before, and this one is an original copy which looks really good, but has just a little bit, like you said, just a little bit of a deformity. It's almost impossible to see, but when you compare side by side, it becomes glaring.
Yeah, I agree, and that's exactly what I'm saying. Is that just human nature when they're holding 2 books one after another? and they know that they're waiting to see and feel that book like they're used to giving it a 9.8, and it's not flat enough, it's not perfect enough, then they're going to downgrade it. And I think a book that they see rarely, a rare book with a different page count or whatever, a book that they don't see as often, has a better chance of getting a 9.8 without being pressed. But I think if you're picking up any of the books that are a normal book for them to take to grade, a common book that they grade often, I think if you're not getting it pressed before you send it in, and not that you necessarily have to use their pressing service. Right. I'm not saying it's a pay-to-win system with CGC. I'm not making that accusation. You press it on your own, you go get it pressed by somebody else, do whatever you want. But I think if they can tell when a book's been pressed or not, and if it's not been pressed, then you have less likelihood of getting a 9.8. That's all. Unless it's a book that they don't see very often and they have nothing to compare it to.
I'm looking through the chat, Bub, and
God, that's huge.
Yeah, a time back, Werewolf by Lunchtime was saying replace staples, and Werewolf, I think that was you. I apologize, it was a while back. I'm assuming he's asking, is that restoration? Yeah, here he goes. At 6:11 p.m., he said replace staples ?
Well, okay, I'll answer that real quick. I'm glad you mentioned it, because I was going to bring up staples. I didn't see his comment, but yes, one thing for me is that I wish that there was a staple replacement service. Like, I wish that was a thing, because I buy low grades, and to me, what could be a better preservation? If I come across a book that has some rust will migrate like mold does. It moves. It can move within your book. Sometimes you can get one book that has one staple rusted, but the other one isn't, by the way it was stored or whatever. And now you're storing it together in those nice new bags, and then before you know it, both staples are rusted, and they haven't been exposed to any more water or in this, sunlight or anything like that. And there you go. So, I think that removing staples and replacing them with cleaner staples would be a good thing. I don't do it to my books because I don't want to decrease their value. But as soon as somebody stands up and says, okay, replacing staples is no longer restoration, I'm signing up for that list, because I got a bunch of books need replaced.
Well, it's interesting, because I was talking to Aaron, Deadpool 2323, and I think he just reminded me here, because we were talking about this, and what if let's put this scenario forward. Let's say you have two Marvel superheroes Secret Wars #1, like the one I have right in front, right? Exactly the same, both direct editions, but one has kind of got a funky, cover, and so or dirty, but it has perfect staples, and another copy is got just a perfect copy, except it's got a rusty staple. If you take a staple from the same comic and replace it with the one in the rusty comic, the rusty staple comic, is that restoration? You're using the same staples that they used, the same comic, the same direct edition, the whole bit, but you're removing the staples from one and inserting it into another. Is that restoration?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just like if you married a cover or a centerfold.
It's a staple.
I know, but the point is, when we talk,
it's a piece of metal.
I agree with you. I wish that was the case. But when we talk about pressing a book, you said it yourself, you're not adding anything to the book that wasn't originally there.
Correct.
And when you clean a book, you're not removing anything from the book that wasn't originally there when it was first printed. So the difference with staple replacement is that you are removing something that was originally there when it was printed, and you're putting something that was never there when it was printed. Now, if you tell me that you found a way to remove rust from a staple while leaving it on the book, now I'm good. Now it's just, it's all good.
So let me get this right. So every comic, so the staple of a comic is somehow unique. Even if you use the exact same comic, the exact same staple type, the same, everything the same, except it came from another book. It came from this spine, not this spine, but make believe this is a Secret Wars one, and you just replace them.
I think it's no different than a married cover or centerfold or anything like that.
But married covers and centerfolds, those have slightly different aspect ratios where the staple holes are. Sometimes they're a little bit higher, they're cut differently, but a staple is a staple is a staple. There are no differences in the staple. They're the same length, the same rigidity. The only thing is one is oxidized and the other one isn't.
You're not going to get an argument out of me.
Oh, okay.
You know, because I wish it was that way. You know, we got I forget who the chat's going by really fast. We got 31 people in the chat, so it's blowing up tonight. So it's hard to catch all of you, but we want to thank you all for being here. Most certainly. One of the ones that I came across was, I think it was even DS saying that it would get a conserved label if you replace the staples. I mean, what color is conserved? Is that green? Is that, I don't know what color a conserved label is, but I know it's not blue, right?
That's a fairly new thing, I think. That's a fairly new. Well, you know, Knights of Old is saying, you know, and Knights of Old, we know him. He's the Golden Age guru. This guy's got an incredible collection. Hold on, I lost it. What was he saying?
I know the chat's flying so fast.
I know it's flying. Replace staples from the same time period could be qualified. So that's what the green label, or is that the purple?
Yeah, that's green.
That's green label.
DS is saying a blue label with a gray stripe across the top is a conserved label.
Conserved, right.
So yeah, that's still not a blue. That's still not a blue universal. And if it's anything less than a blue universal or even a yellow signature series, to me that lessens the value of the book.
All right, now Deadpool 20. Okay, all right. Well, okay. I guess we have to me. It seems to me a ridiculous distinction to make. All right. You know, honestly, it does. To me, are you telling me that it's better to leave? You know, let's say you can't reverse the rust on the staple. Maybe you can. Maybe you can't. You can throw it, take it out, throw it in vinegar. You know, let it. But again, you're going to dissolve some of the metal and put it back into the comic, and that's okay. But you can't get a comic with the same exact staple, exact same comic, and put it into that comic so that it will preserve that comic and not let it continue degrading. To me, that it seems like just a totally ridiculous type of distinction to me. And
I agree with you.
The minutia has gotten to the point of ridiculousness of absolutely just, you know, micro, you know, viewing of a comic. To me, I would do it 100 times out of 100. It makes sense to me. It's the same comic. It's the same darn staple. I do it. All right.
I agree with you. Now, and I wouldn't even go as far to get a time period staple. I just get a brand new one, nice and shiny. To me, it's like a brand new bag and board. You know, if somebody told me, you know, to keep your comics from ever rusting and getting additional damage and stains, you should replace your staples every 2 years, I would do it. You know, so
yeah,
you know, it amazes me. I went through a collection about 2 months ago, and I bought some of them, but boy, were they rough. And they were in the original mailers, and they were early bronze, late silver, and they were in the original mailers. And the problem was that they were in the paper mailers, like at that time they weren't even shipped in plastic. They were just like shipped in grocery bag, like card shop. You know, I don't know. I'm from New York City, so you know, yeah, it's a thin brown paper bag. You know,
that's
basically all it was.
It didn't even cover the whole comic. Some of them didn't even cover the whole comic. Just the middle.
Yeah. That's exactly right. So what happened is that from about 3/4 of the book down, and in some cases from 1/4 down, they were acid eaten. They were eaten from never being removed from the bag. They've been in the bag for 30 years, and they're just going to stay there. Or longer, really. They were in the bag for 40 years until I came up and I started pulling them out and like, oh, you're going to, you know, is that going to hurt the value? I'm like, nothing's going to hurt the value worse than leaving it in that brown paper bag.
You got it. The acid is going to kill it. Yeah.
Ate through those books in the bottom.
Yeah.
You know, some of them were salvageable and I made them an offer on some of them, but some of them were just destroyed. Absolutely destroyed. And so, you know, so what's to say, okay, well, the original state of that comic was it came in that mailer, so you should leave it in there even if it's destroying the book. And the same thing goes for people who leave, you know, I see a lot of still in the plastic. You know, you'll see a promo from the 80s or 90s, and everyone will be so proud that it's still in the original plastic. I'm like, that plastic's full of acid. And that little tiny piece of cardboard they stuck in there is full of acid. And that little card, that trading card that came with your New Mutants 1 or whatever the heck it is.
X-Force 1.
X-Force 1, you know, a different card in every bag, still in the bag. That's full of plastic. It's full of acid. You got Midnight Suns, Ghost Rider book I see all the time still in the plastic. That's full of acid.
Yep.
Spider-Man 1, there's a bunch of those that were polybagged full of acid.
Yep.
Just saying, you know.
Yep. Yep. Hey, listen, but let me tell you what though. I mean, comics really are so different in the way that they age. I remember I had a one of those DC super packs, right? And these were 15 centers, I believe. And they were in that poly bag, that really cheap. I mean, you could, if you even pick it up with a nail, that thing would split. I mean, like a fingernail, right? It would split. And yet the comics inside, even though they were in there for 30 some years, were absolutely pristine. Like not a bit of tanning, nothing, right? Zero. And I had, and we got another one a little later on. And the thing was, it looked like it had been, buried somewhere because it was brown, brittle, just terrible. So the outside conditions also make a big difference in how that acid interacts with the paper. But yeah, generally speaking, if you have a poly bag, it's a good idea to get it out of there eventually. If it's, unless some people are poly, they like collecting the 3-packs and so forth. But I think there is a way to preserve it even in the poly bag, but it takes a lot of work. But generally speaking, if you just want that comic to be preserved, you probably should take it out of the poly bag eventually.
Yeah, I think so.
Somebody was asking, again, Nerd versus Fat asked, can they even detect if the staple has been replaced? And DS answered it, of course, our resident Brainiac, he said, yes, they can. There's apparently some minute way of bending it that the machine does that humans can't. So apparently they can detect. If I think that'd be a great experiment though, Bub. Wouldn't you think?
I'm not wasting my money on it. Just send it in and get it rejected.
Yeah, true. But it'd be a good experiment. You're flushing 30 some bucks down the toilet, right? But take that staple from the exact same comic. Be very careful. Don't rip. Don't even put it. Not even so much as a little. You have to be very careful, right? Take it out. Take another one from the same comic. Put it in. Bend it so that it looks pretty much the same, and see what happens. I'm curious.
No one's gonna buy a book from you, Roger.
I'm curious. I mean, if I had 35 bucks to blow, I'd be curious about that.
Well, let's talk. Okay, so we've got. I think we've beat the staple horse to death.
Yeah. That thing is dead and buried. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got staple removal, right? We've got pressed or not pressed. That's up to you whether you like that or not, or some people don't like it for sure. And then we got trimming, of course. And as you were saying, some of that marble chipping was so bad, it makes it look bad. One of the things that bothers me with, say, like a detached cover that gets or anything that has fray along the spine is that the CGC or CBCS don't really take a lot of care in putting it in the inner well to make sure that it looks better. Like when I take a book that has a messed up spine or something, I kind of fold the tabs in and put them back in the place where they go, right? And slide them in ever so carefully in the bag. And, as long as you don't pull it out, it looks better than it really is, right?
Correct.
But I was looking at some slabs this weekend to buy, and there were a lot that had frayed chips and edges and all pulled out. And I'm thinking, man, all you had to do was tuck that in a little bit when you put it in the inner well. I mean, I don't know what the mechanical or manual process is for getting it in the inner well, but there's got to be a way to do it without having pieces of the book hanging off the side, So that's a little frustrating. But I don't know what they do about that. So, but anyway, the point is that I felt like, well, I'd rather somebody just pluck that little piece off than display it, So, so I understand trimming. I understand it is what I'm trying to say. But still, if you're going to buy a book, there's a lot of people, that's like a super, if they think a book's even come close to being trimmed or color touched, they're out. Like they don't want any part of that at all.
Well, we don't have to go any further than our DS, than our own buddy. We know about what he thinks about trimming. He'd rather, even if it was a key, he wouldn't want it.
Yeah, that's true.
So, and I respect the S to death. So I mean, to me, I kind of makes sense to me because you're actually defacing the comic book there. I mean, imagine if somebody trimmed you, right, and you have like 1% less skin on your right side, right? I mean, it's just not natural. So I could sort of understand why that is frowned upon. Now, again, does it look better? And again, our vision is not so acute that we can tell just by visually looking at, well, most of us, certainly not me. But micro trimming is, my understanding, is next to impossible to detect. So because there is slight variations in the size of comics. And when I'm saying slight, I mean to the micrometer, right? Micrometer. But so I can understand why people would do that, because it's an easy way of sort of getting around a big problem of those 60s Marvels, especially.
It is unsightly to have a book that has all that chipping. I would definitely agree with that. But once someone told me that they took a pair of scissors to it, if I felt like it needed to be trimmed, I would much rather do the trimming myself when it's in my personal collection. Not that I even would at this point, but maybe earlier on in my time, I may have trimmed a couple of books and just to make them neater. But that wasn't for sale. That was so that they look better for me, And we're kind of getting closer to the topic of the night. We're pretty far. We're several train stops away from it at this point, but we're a little bit closer in the idea that there are a lot of people out there selling. Somebody mentioned, I think Area 51 had mentioned facsimile covers, reprint, trimmed books. Just what else? Replace staples, color touch books. Tons of erroneous listings out there on eBay and other sites as well. People that know that their books are in some way of lower value because of what's been done to them, and yet they're passing them off as books that have had nothing done to them. And I think that's the real shame that we're getting to here.
Yeah, and that, again, that's why a lot of people, like to stick to certain sellers that they have dealt with in the past that they consider honest and trustworthy, and that they send their books into CJC and they have no defects, and they pay a premium for that because you're getting it's sort of like an insurance policy. Well, not strictly speaking, but you know what I mean. It's you have a lot more confidence in what you're getting than if you're getting from a random eBay seller that we don't know where the collection came from. It may have come from a legitimate source, or it may have come from a family of trimmers or restorers or whoever. So yeah, I think it's one of those things that, to me, it's not that big of a deal to me, because I just want to have a certain copy that looks presentable. But for those of us that are much more higher end in the hobby, I can see why, because it's a big difference in value, obviously, if they ever want to resell it. And it's dishonest. And I agree. I don't see a reason why you should not disclose that if you know that is the case, other than greed.
Yeah, I think that's got to be your only. There can be a sliver of ignorance allowed. If you're talking about micro trimming or something like that, and you've purchased it at a good price, and you're trying to sell it for a good price, and you think there's meat left on the bone, you didn't know that it had any trimming done, and then down the line it comes back graded by somebody trimmed, and you're like, look, I didn't know. I mean, there can be some of that allowed, but if you're doing it on a regular basis or purposefully doing it in any way, then yeah, that's not cool, man.
Yeah, it's not cool. Yeah. So are we essentially going to be talking about if it's too good to be true? This is what you told me, right? If it's too good to be true, it probably is, and don't fall for it.
Well, look, yes, but here's the caveat to that, is that sometimes the thing that you're looking for, or what you think is too good to be true, may not be your biggest clue that it's fake. A lot of people will see there's been a ton of Hulk 181s popping up and other major keys popping up for sale from Chinese sellers. And they're throwing these books out at like $75 a piece. And, what they're doing is they're going through sold eBay listings, and they're copying the pictures from sold eBay listings. And then they're putting up their own listing. And if you'll look, you're like, oh my gosh, $75. But a lot of people are maybe new to the hobby, don't know how much these books exactly are worth, but they know that they're big, expensive books. They happen to search like, oh, I'd like to buy that. And what they're trying to do with the low price is kind of trick you into having urgency behind your purchase. Like, I have to hurry up and buy this now before someone else does. You notice they're never auctions. They're always buy it now.
Right now. Yep.
Because they don't want that listing up there for a week. They're trying to get somebody in a matter of minutes to bite, and then once somebody pays for it, they shut down that eBay account and they move it to another eBay account and they do it again. And they've got your money, and it's very hard to get your money back at that point. Even if you get it back from PayPal or something or eBay, that person's still got your money, so or got someone's money.
Yeah, so DS is saying no one should ever buy a comic from a seller in China.
Yeah, I agree, and I don't. But I think that Silver Age Davis saying I have hundreds of awesomeness books on the way from China. I'm killing it lately. Yeah, I'm sure he is.
Yeah, right. All his comics from Toledo, Ohio.
Yeah, they're all price variants.
All the crack houses in Toledo, Ohio, he's cleaned them out.
Yes, he has, and he picked up comics while he was there.
And he picked up.
Then we had. All these people also. So first thing is the price, right? So you see $75 for Hulk 181. You already know that that's bupkis, and you're running from that, right? But it might not be. You never know. I mean, is there really that much difference between somebody selling a Hulk 181 on eBay for $75 and coming across one in a dollar bin, which we all hope to happen someday, right? In modern days, I know you've had one. You found them in dollar bins, but I mean
that was back in the early '80s. Yeah. a little bit different back then.
Right. So if you find one now, that's like, wow, how do they not know what they have? But and some people can trick themselves into thinking that someone selling on eBay has the same mentality. I don't know what this is, but comic books should be expensive, so here's $75 and see what happens. Mm-hmm. And I'd say that a few of these end up getting sold, unfortunately, and of course, no one gets anything. DS says someone listed a Werewolf by Night 32 about an hour ago on eBay, very fine range, for $15 and sold immediately. Yeah, exactly. So did someone just get scammed out of $15? Probably. It's it's hard to tell.
But it could be that somebody found it in a cleaning out a house and they have no knowledge of comics. They didn't do any research. They just threw it on there. But that's like 1% possibility. You know what I mean?
Yeah. For me, I run down this list. I go, what's the price? If the price is low enough that it intrigued me, okay, fine. But I'm not going to buy it right now. Let's look at the price. Then I go straight to who's selling it. And you don't even have to click anything. Right beside the seller's name is a little rating in parentheses. You look at that. If it's 0, they have no sales.
Yeah.
Then it's a fake account that they just put up a minute ago, and you move on. You don't even do anything with it. And I'm not the type. I don't start reporting people and stuff like that. I just move on.
DS did.
I know. DS I know. He'll report them. I don't know enough all the time to do that. So then the next thing is that I'm looking at seller feedback. How much seller feedback? How much have they sold lately? If there's nothing past 30 days, then I'm probably not. I don't believe that they have this key comic book, and they've never been selling anything except for last week. I'm just not buying that either. And so when all those things kind of add up, and then I look for where they're located, and even you can even check a seller and see if they have a buyer's rating. Is this someone who buys a lot on eBay at least? Yeah. And if they haven't bought or sold anything on eBay and they're selling this book at $1,000 less than it goes for on the market, it's probably a scam. Now DS is saying that Werewolf by Night 32 looked legit to him, but if it did look legit, I bet you he did the same thing I just said. He went, he looked at multiple pictures is another one. Make sure that the pictures are zoomable. If they're not zoomable, and in other words, they're low res and they're probably cut and pasted from somewhere else or screenshot. Yep. So that's no good. And so if they're not zoomable and there's only like one picture and they have no seller ratings, so no prior experience as a buyer or a seller, and the price is too good to be true, then you put all that together, it's probably, if you have even 2 of those things, it's probably a scam. You get into 3 or 4 of them, you definitely just want to move on.
Yeah, Knights of Old was saying that there's no risk if you pay with a credit card through PayPal. In other words, there's no risk of you losing your money. It's just a time. You have to go through a lot of hoops sometimes to get your money back.
Yeah.
And then he says if you wait too long, then the good deal is gone. If you go through all these different researches and if it's a really good deal, whoever is in behind you who's 5 seconds quicker is going to hit that buy it now and you're going to lose it. I think that's what he's saying.
Yeah.
But, it's a balancing game there. You take your risks. If you want to, if you don't want to look at the sealer fade back, you want to hit that buy it now, probably you'll get your money at some point, but who knows?
Yeah, I missed out on a book yesterday because I waited too long. I was waiting. It had an odd circle. It was a stamp. It had an odd stamp on it. It didn't quite look like a pen stamp to me, but it looked foreign, but I couldn't tell what it was. And it really wasn't pretty either. It was like smudged and smeared a little bit, and it kind of didn't ruin the cover. But if I knew it was a pen stamp, I would have probably bought it, and the price was decent. Not a great price for the book, but good enough if you're into pen stamps. And I don't have a pen stamp book. I have Pence priced books, but I don't have a stamp book. So and this was a book I wanted anyway. So I was like, well, that works out pretty well. And so I took a picture of it, sent it to JPL Flash, and I sent it to Comic Geek McD. And I said, all right, guys, is this a pen stamp or not? McD comes back to me and he's like, I can't really tell, and I don't want to be wrong, so I'm just going to say I don't know. And that's fair.
That's fair.
That's honesty. Fair. So I'm like, okay, good deal. Well, freaking JPL Flash is still sleeping under a bridge somewhere with no Wi-Fi. He's like, in the sewers under the Tower of London. I haven't heard anything from him until like this morning, or what's morning to me, right?
Right.
And then he's like, yeah, that's a pen stamp for sure. And I went back, and of course, the book's already gone, right? So I missed out on it.
You could have sent it to me, Bob. I have several pen stamp copies.
Man, this was weird. It actually wasn't technically a pen stamp according to JPL. I forget what he called it, but it was before they went to the pence. It had like
shillings.
Yeah, it was a shilling stamp.
Yeah.
So it was before they went to pence, and it had a K on it, which I didn't know. Talk about old world English. You spell shilling with a K, I guess. But
yeah. That was just the symbol they used for it. Yeah.
Yep. So I didn't know that. So that's what happened. So I missed out on that book. So that stinks. But yeah, you can miss out on a book by doing too much investigation. Yeah. But, for me, I usually prefer to investigate and know that I spent my money. I get nervous. Look, I know you don't buy on Instagram much, Roger, or on Facebook. But when I buy on Instagram, that's my most nervous feeling after buying a book on Instagram. Like my butthole is puckered for until I get a tracking number. I just feel like I've just been robbed. Like I feel that entire time that someone just robbed me until I get a tracking number. That's how I feel.
That image is going to be hard to get out of my head right now.
That's the way it is, man. I'm nervous. I hate it. I hate buying on Instagram. It drives me crazy.
Yeah, you've told me this before. I've tried a few times to buy on Instagram, but I'm always too late. By the time I get to it, it's already sold. Either the dollar auctions or sometimes just the buy it nows. So I've never had the chance to buy one yet. Pope is asking. I don't know if he's asking us or somebody in the chat. What about water damage? What is the highest grade with water damage?
Oh man, I don't know that. I'm not good enough for grading for that. I know that what happens is that there's a couple of different layers of water damage. So if you have ripple and brittle is what, the final stages of water damage. If you had full water damage, you would have stain where the ink would be run, right? So you have staining, then you have drying and rippled, and you have brittleness. And all three of those things can happen with a real bad water damage. And I think that the grade will vary depending on which of those you have, because some of those can be pressed. You can get the wave out most of the time. You can hydrate it enough, usually to save some of the suppleness of the page and restore some of that. But you can't do much with the stain. And if it's a bad stain and affects multiple pages and art, or if the stain goes through a word bubble and you can't read it, that affects story. So you can get a lot of damage from just, a quarter-sized drop of water can cause a ton of damage to the book and will make the grade vary widely. So that's a tough one.
That's a tough one. You know, he explained it here. He says, I'm showing that Brother Voodoo book, and he's got one to complete the Strange Tales run. I need one more too, Pope. And the back cover was water damaged, so that's why he's asking. I mean, I don't know exactly how. I mean, I'm certain that it's not going to get anywhere like a very fine or anything like that. But the back cover certainly means that it's going to be a lot more presentable. Obviously, if it doesn't go, like you said, if it doesn't migrate through too far through the book.
Yeah.
I have some which I've explained. I put under the air handler and when I was a youngster, and it leaked. And so a lot of my Submariners have, like what you're saying, it's a classic kind of spread with a water stain, kind of a browning. It spreads out and it goes all the way through the book, all the way from front to back. And that's incorrigible. I mean, it is what it is. You know, to press, you'd have to press every page individually, I think, to get that, you know, which is not worth it. It's not worth it for a cheap book like that. But I don't know, Pope. I would hope that it wouldn't degrade it that much if it's just the back cover. But I don't know. I'd be guessing.
I have a couple of things that my first appearance of Apocalypse. I forget the book number. I feel like it's X Factor 17 or something like that. But the first appearance of Apocalypse had fire damage all down the side.
X Factor 6, I think, is his first.
Is it 6? Okay, yeah. So it has
cameo, 6 full appearance.
It's completely burnt on the side, and when you take it out of the bag, you can still smell the fire in it. Char. And I had a Tomb of Dracula #1 that has a rusty staple, right? At the top. The top staple is real rusted. But it looks like someone tried some amateur restoration to remove the rust and sprayed it with WD-40. Because then there's a grease spot all around the rusted staple with like a rusty color, and it's very clearly greasy, you know?
Yeah.
And that was, I would assume. And then the staple has, like, in the middle of it looks clean, but the edges are somebody got some rust off of it, but they spread it to the rest of the book.
Yeah. See, to me, the better procedure there would be to have been removed the staple and put it.
Let's not get back to that.
But I'm not going to get back into that. But to me, that logically, to me, that makes a lot more sense. But again, now it's the same. Okay. It's the same staple now. We're talking about not even a different staple from a different book. It's the same staple. We're just taking it out so to reverse the process of rust. But anyway, forget it. We buried that. We buried that horse. The thing is disintegrated at this point.
Reprints too, right?
Keep going.
We're selling reprints as originals, trying to trick people into that. You know, if you see an Action Comics #1 for sale for, $700, it's fake. Probably, you're not going to be that.
Not probably, definitely.
There could be somebody out there who doesn't know any better.
No.
Action Comics. Here's another Action Comics #1, right? So they just keep coming. Tons of those. Of course, there's a Hulk 181 reprint out now, which is funny because a lot of people are talking about the barcode in the bottom right-hand corner.
Yep.
On the reprint for the Hulk 181. I don't have my copy handy, the reprint copy. But what happens is that on that, I guess there was a blank cover issued, a Hulk 181 sketch cover. And when you pull back the cardstock of the sketch cover, the cover is the Hulk 181 cover behind it, and it does not have the barcode.
Oh, really? So there's a variant of that facsimile cover?
Yes. There's a blank variant of that facsimile cover, and it does not have a barcode.
Oh.
Now it still says 399 cents up here.
Yeah, right, yeah.
But it does not have the barcode, and that's tricking a few people. So you got to be careful with all those. And then there's some flat out scams out there, which I guess some people call raffles.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know DS hates these too, but
those Instagram things.
If you're on Instagram and I see you holding a raffle or advertising someone else's raffle, I immediately unfollow you. And that's just because I can't stand being inundated with, raffles. Constantly raffles all the time. Selling an ASM 300 for $10, this can be yours. And they're selling 60 spots. And they're getting $600 for a $300 book.
Yep.
It's like, my goodness. Like, that's just so harsh.
But that's the same as a lottery, right? I mean, you're paying a couple bucks at the hope of getting something a lot more, and they're still making money.
Yeah, and a lot of them are illegal. A lot of them are run illegally. If your state doesn't allow gambling, and raffle is considered a gambling by most state statutes,
Yep, right.
they're illegal. So what you get, I don't know if you're familiar with this term, Roger, but it's called waffle. It's spelled like waffle.
Waffle?
It's a waffle, right?
It's a waffle. No, I don't know what a waffle is.
Pretty sure the term comes from a winning raffle. And what that means is that everyone gets what they pay for. So let's say I said, okay, here's a Action Comics reprint. It says $1 on the tag. So this is worth $1. So everyone give me $1, and everyone gets one of these books. $1 plus shipping. You claim it. You get this book. And then I'm going to send you this book no matter what. But I'm going to sell 60 of these books. And every time somebody pays me the full price for this book plus shipping, they're going to be entered into a free raffle for the ASM 300.
Wow.
See how that works?
Yeah.
It's very sneaky, but that's a way to get around the state laws. Because as long as everyone wins, it's not considered gambling.
Right. It's like a gumball machine or whatever.
They have to get out as at least what they put in value. And it has to be agreed upon before they buy it. So some people will hold waffles. More will hold raffles, but some will hold waffles. And then,
It's amazing the things I learned on this chat. It's just, it's amazing.
Yep. And my thing with those is that if it's someone reputable and you're familiar with them and you've bought from them before, that's fine.
Yeah.
But if you've never heard of them before and they just came out and they're just showing a picture of a lot of times they don't even show a picture of the book that they're going to raffle off. They just show like a picture of like a stock image of the cover. Like they'll just show a stock image of ASM 300 and then they'll say, we've got an ASM 300 9.8, we're going to raffle off. Everybody buy a spot.
So that's different from a lot of like the mystery boxes that have a big prize possibility, because at least you're getting some value for your mystery box. In other words, everybody's getting 10 comics, right, from these mystery boxes, but there might be an 11th, which could be a Hulk 181 or ASM 129 or a New Mutants 98, the whole bit.
You're right on, Roger. To me, the last and final and most probably acceptable scam out there, and this is the one I was worried about even mentioning, but since you brought it up,
well, I didn't mention it as a scam. I'm mentioning it as comparing it to a raffle.
It does compare to a raffle very closely, and what they're saying in those is, I'm creating 100 mystery boxes. Some of you will get. They're $100 a piece, and some of you will get $300 worth of books, and some of you are going to get $75 worth of books. And good luck to everyone, right?
Right.
And Mr. I don't know how to pronounce it, but I want to say it's Mr. Garrell. It could be Garrell. Yes. Okay. Mr. Garrell had one where he put up, and I won't mention where he got the comics, but you can watch his video for that. But he put up 6 months worth of mystery box comics. So this is what he has collected by buying mystery boxes for the last 6 months. And he stacked them all up. He told you how much he paid for them. And then he went through all the items that he got in the mystery boxes and said, what do you guys think? Was it worth it? Right? Mm-hmm. Would you do it? He was.
I saw his video today. Yeah.
So my response to him is that, to me, buying a mystery box is like having a stranger pick out your meal at a restaurant. It's like going to the restaurant and having a stranger order for you. Mm-hmm. It may work out and you like what you get. Yeah. It might happen, right? You might eat this was a great meal. But a lot of the times it's going to work out and say, yeah, it was okay, but it wasn't really what I like. It wasn't my taste. But I tell you, one main thing about it is that you're always paying steak price, and most of the time you're getting hamburgers. And every now and then, someone's going to get a lobster, right?
Well, yeah, I guess. That's one way of looking at it, I suppose. Yes, that's one way of looking. I mean, to me, I guess I'm not quite as cynical as you about them, but it doesn't make sense for me because, I am now very focused on just certain aspects of my collection that I want to expand, and the others are going to be status quo. But let's look at it from a different point of view, right? If you don't have an LCS nearby, and you want, you don't care about certain characters or certain genres, you just want, a wide range of comics, and there is a possibility that you could get a Grail, and we know that Dawn Comic Book Junkie won 2 of them. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's not a scam. They do give out those Grails. Okay, if you are in that niche of people that I'm talking about, I don't consider it a really bad deal. Now, again, for me and for you, obviously, it makes no sense. I'm granted, but I think there is an audience for that type of mystery box. Again, it doesn't make sense to me, but I can see where somebody, obviously it works because I see a lot of people buying them. So there must be some kind of intrinsic attraction to them. And I think it's because there is a possibility that they could get a Grail, and that is the incentive for, perhaps getting some comics that they are not too crazy about.
And some people are saying in the chat that, yeah, well, you get you get the excitement of opening something you don't know what's inside. To me, that's the equivalent of giving your kid $20 and telling them to go buy you a Christmas gift. Chances are you'd rather just keep your 20.
20, right? Yeah, I'm with you.
Or you're gonna come back and get like a paper tie, and your kid's running around with $18 in his pocket. You're like, what's going on here? Did I even get what I paid for? And I know that some people are really excited to get free things and stuff, and I understand the argument behind all that. But I say, watch the videos, and when you watch the videos of these people opening their mystery boxes, for me, you could watch them on mute. You don't even have to listen to what they're saying. Just watch their facial expressions. And if they pull out 10 comics, they're disappointed in 5 or 6 of them. By the end, they're like, well, this isn't so bad. Here's another one. And then on the last 2 comics, they're like, oh, these are kind of nice. Okay, yeah, this wasn't a bad deal. They have to talk themselves into a purchase they already made to find value into it. And most of them are like that. Now, every now and then, you got JB out there, right? And he's pulling a Hulk 181 out of a Spider-Man box. Congratulations, man. But for every one moment like that, I see countless videos of people opening their mystery boxes in disappointment.
Certainly. Yeah. I mean, listen, it has to be that way, Bub. I mean, when you're selling, unless you have unless you're like Bueller, which you get things at a very cheap bottom line price, and you're selling them cheap because Bueller is selling them, when you do the economics, he's making very little, right? Unless you're doing something like that. But he's not promising a Grail now. He's promising that you get, a certain amount of comics, and that's it. He's not promising you're going to get a Grail. So I don't consider a Bueller box in this conversation.
Fair enough.
But if you're talking about the Spider-Man booth, and I think the mystery what Mr. Gurrell was talking about, those kind of things, I understand. Listen, when I lived in Florida, in South Florida, there were lines trying to get those lottos on Saturday nights. All right. Yeah. And they don't have a small snowball's hell chance of winning that, but people are still putting 10 and 20 bucks. That's flushing it down the drain, essentially. At least you're getting some comics, you're getting something tangible back and the possibility of a big score. So I can sort of understand that it has some attraction to a certain niche audience here, not just on YouTube, but comic collectors.
Yeah, and we got the Gray Man in here saying that he's not seen that many people disappointed. Maybe they're not over enthused, but they're not disappointed. And maybe that's a little harsh for me to say that they're disappointed. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that they don't look any more excited than they would if they had just got their money back in the mail. Like if I sent off $20 and then I filmed myself opening a package and inside was an envelope with $20, I'd be like, hey, $20, but I'm hoping to get something that's like $100 bill, right? So
Now, this is wisdom here, though. Mr. Miracle Comics, this is wisdom. We're on a show together called Graders Notes, right? This is wisdom. He says, if you want to win free comics, enter contests on YouTube. And
Yeah.
he's right, because on Wednesday, I'm going to make a video about my wins on YouTube. And I paid $0 for them. $0. All I did is make a video to support these great channels. You know,
yeah.
I have won over 10 contests in a year.
Wow.
Because I love this community and I enter them, and sometimes I win. If I don't win, no big deal, because I supported the channel. My objective is not to win. My objective is to bring exposure to these channels. But it doesn't suck to get some nice free comics, and I got some pops too. So good wisdom there, Mr. Miracle. There's no risk there.
And Pope Cerebus is saying, like, the mystery mail call, which I think is the one that Mr. Guerrero was showing off today, or maybe yesterday, is that it's kind of a Loot Crate monthly service kind of thing. But I tell you, I've seen a lot of those Loot Crate boxes and Owl crates and Stanley boxes and Spider-Man boxes. I've seen most of those end in, if not disappointment, at least moderate happiness to underwhelmed.
Yeah, you know, sometimes it's just plain ambivalence. You know, they're just like, okay. You know,
I mean, if you can hand it, if at the end you can hand it back and get your money back, then I think that will be fine. You know, but obviously there's no mechanism for that. So after you get this box, if somebody said, "Hey, you want your $25 back?" I think most people would be like, "Yes, please. Yeah, I'll take my money back." You know, and they're like, "But do you want to stop sending us $25?" And they're like, "No, I want to keep sending you $25 because." Heck, the next box has got to be better than this one, you know. That I think that's some more of that gambling back in there, you know.
Right, but to me, you know, this is not in any way, shape, or form a scam. They're not in any way being deceptive. They're not forcing you to buy it. It's just like a lotto, you know. It's the hype, right? You came to them, okay, and you were giving them your $25. They're producing the comics that they said so, and some, if you're incredibly lucky, you get, you know, like JB or Don Comic Book Jump, you get $1,000 or $2,000, whatever. I don't know what the value is of 6.0, but comic book. So to me, that's not a scam. It's not even really deceptive. It's more just you're preying on the emotion and the possibilities of a grail, which to me would not work because keys don't really matter to me. So my mentality is different regardless, but I can see why this is being done, and I can see why people are buying into it, because it does have a certain attraction that just buying comics randomly doesn't have.
Well, I think also that we'd be remiss if we did not mention, of course, that not all of these are created equally. No. Just like not every low, you know, priced key book on eBay is a scam either. However, I do see this as a vehicle that scammers use to pawn off quarter books in a box and offload it from their collection, or just buy people who buy a long box for $50, and then whatever they get, they pack it into flat rate mailers and send them out. You know, right. and you're paying way more than they're worth, and there's no intention of putting in a grail in any of those. They dangle a grail in a picture, and no one gets one. They may not even have a grail to give away.
Oh no, that's a different animal. That is totally.
But
that's fraud. That's fraud in any way that you, shape, or form that you want to put it.
But it happens. And
I'm certain. I'm certain.
You know, and then, you know, you send one box with a couple of grails to a YouTuber, make sure that they get the grails. That way everyone is cheering your boxes, and it's free advertising for your boxes. Mm-hmm. So, you know, there's also a lot of manipulation that can take place in these things too. So, you know, that's why it kind of fits in this category, not because they're all scams, just as all raffles aren't all scams either. Right. You know, it can be a more fair raffle for sure. You know, sometimes you see charity raffles, things of that nature as well. So, you know, none of these things are exclusively all scams, but these are all vehicles that scammers use to get your money and give you nothing or something of very little value for it.
Right. And I just wanted to make that clear to the audience in the chat that we're not saying that just because somebody is doing this, it's a scam. We're just saying that there is potential for a fraudulent or deceptive type of practice because of the nature of what they're giving out. And not to say that they are. It's just, again, like anything else, people, unfortunately, they use these vehicles for, ill-gotten ends. And that's all we're saying. Just be careful, be vigilant, do your research, but not necessarily saying you this is something you shouldn't do. We're not saying that. And I just want to make that clear.
We're just saying, and that's why people feel so protective of their sellers. So, for instance, let's say you're someone who does get a Bueller box and you stand by them and you think they're awesome and you love them. People are very protective of that, and they say, I love this guy. We do great buying boxes from him, and I love everything I get. That's great. Those are the people that we're looking for, and those are the people that we want to support, and we want to enjoy their stuff that they're giving to us. And the same thing on Instagram. There's sellers that I buy from on a regular basis from Instagram because after my first transaction went very smoothly, I trust them. And, the first time I didn't buy big books, but now I may buy big books from them. Same thing on Facebook. I've had good buyers or good sellers and bad sellers. And the bad sellers, I don't ever fool with anything. They tag me and stuff and try and get me to buy their stuff, and I just ignore it. And the good sellers I go back to often. So you have to trust your own experience over time, but just be careful at that first step when you first step out to do any kind of purchase where that's not in person or through a very, very strict and rigidly, controlled transaction mechanism like eBay. And then even then you have to look out for scammers. So just be careful buying stuff when you're not in person, and even in person, right? Because you get trim books and resto, and just be careful, everybody.
And I think that's probably the best advice we can give is that, listen, we're just saying that don't let your the minute hope that something may happen be something that you're going to rely upon. Just because we see that these guys get these grails, the fact is that the chances are you won't. And don't put all your hopes upon getting one. Just if you're content with what you're getting, you're fine, you're good, you're perfect. But don't say, I'm going to buy 4 or 5 boxes a month because I want to get that grail. Because now disappointment and your money, it's going to be to the point where if you had saved that money, maybe you could have bought that grail instead of having to buy all these boxes to try to get that grail.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're saying the same thing. Be careful, everybody, and manage your money. And I really don't need anyone's help to spend my money. So if I got $20, I'll go buy a $20 comic. If I have $20, I don't expect to get a $100 comic. I guess that's kind of how I look at it. And for the 5 times that I could take a chance to get a $100 comic, I could have saved my money and bought one. So, having a little bit of patience, having a little bit of discipline, and being wary of transactions that look just a little too good to be true will serve you well in this hobby.
Yeah, agreed. As I always tell my daughter, there is no substitute for the foot between the top of your head and the bottom of your neck, right? There's no internet that can substitute for that. That there are people are going to tell you things but some have agendas, but God gave you a vehicle to sort of be able to sift through that. You have to apply your wisdom, apply your experience, apply what you know and what you have experienced in your past, and you'll be fine. But if you're going just on the emotion, if you're going just on the possibilities, just on the distant hope, probably that's not a good way to make a decision.
Yeah, I agree. All right. I think we've wrapped it up pretty good for one week. Of course, DS Comics isn't here to tell everyone to do their homework, but it would be very appropriate if he was.
Oh, yeah. This would be a very appropriate topic for him to have been part of. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm glad he was able to join us in the chat. Speaking of the chat, I'm going to do a quick run through. We had Mr. Miracle, Biggie Shack, Pope Service, Bigglesworth, Knights of Old, Gray Man. I Love Disney and Comics, very active tonight. Thank you, Comics Edition.
Yes,
Silver Age Dave, Metarog still hanging out. I can't get rid of that guy. I've blocked him 100 ways. C. Woodard, Charlton 66.
I'm like one of those German cockroaches. You stomp me, I still keep walking.
I'm scared of you now. Just a great chat. Sorry if I missed anybody. I know we had Mike had to go and just fantastic.
McGee's still up.
Is he really? My goodness, he's go to bed.
Wow. Hey, Mr. Miracle's right. He says when Roger and I were kids, the internet were called books. Now he's not as old as I am. Not even close. I don't think, Dave. So come on. What we called them stone tablets when I was young.
Yeah, I'm sure you're trying to pull staples out of those too.
Oh, you know it. Pull splinters, staples, anything.
Absolutely. I gotta replace this tablet.
Thanks, Don. Thanks, Don. Great show. He says great show as always. Thanks, Don. Great to have you here, buddy.
Yep, good to have you guys, and thank you so much for joining us on No Faces Chat. We'll catch you next week. Same time. DS should be back, assuming that he did one top hog collar at the Hee Haw circus that he was attending this week.
My.
We're very proud of him. We look forward to seeing his first place ribbon on whatever hog he pins it. And we thank you all for joining us. Roger, you want to say your goodbyes?
Yeah, everybody. Thanks for holding up with us today. It was kind of a different topic than what we usually talk about here, but I think it's a topic we should discuss. Just again, use your head, guy. Like I sent a text to Bub this week because there was a really cheap Ghost Marvel Spotlight #5, and I knew it was a scam. But I knew that Bub was going to tell me that it was a scam. And once I heard that, then I was able to, reduce my blood pressure and be able to go on with my day. So thank you very much for putting up with us. Next week, we'll be back, hopefully, with a much more positive and lighter topic. But you guys are awesome. Be blessed and be back.
Thank you. And yes, I agree with Roger. Just take the time to look around and find friends in the community that you can ask questions of, because sometimes 4, 6, 8 eyes are better than one set. So that's always helpful too. Reach out to each other and ask questions and get help. So all right, and I thank you all, and we'll catch you next time on the No Faces Comic Chat. Thanks to everybody in the chat, and thanks to the guests as always, and the co-hosts and whatnot. And we'll catch you next week and read a comic. Bye.